The grass was barely 6 inches high when I heard the sirens. It was a quiet Saturday morning in northern Colorado. Sunlight cutting through the mist, the hum of my old John Deere mower steady and calm until the HOA patrol car rolled to a stop right behind me. Then came the voice I'd come to dread. Karen, she stood on the curb, arms crossed, phone still in her hand. "You're destroying HOA property again, Mark," she barked. "I've already called 911. You're going to regret this." I shut off the mower. For a second there was nothing but the clicking of the engine cooling down and the chirp of cicadas from the ditch. I looked at the property line. Every inch of it measured, documented, surveyed. I knew exactly where my land ended and theirs began. But in this neighborhood, knowing the law didn't mean they followed it. When the police officer stepped out of the cruiser, his hand rested lightly on his belt. "Sir, we got a report about property destruction," he said, scanning the lawn like it was a crime scene. "Then you better start with the HOA," I said quietly, "because they've been trespassing on my land for months." The cop looked uncertain. Karen chimed in, waving her phone. "He's cutting past the HOA fence line. This is all common property. We have rights, but here's the thing, that common property she was yelling about, I had the plat met from the county clerk, stamped and notarized, showing my parcel extending 2 ft beyond their so-called border fence. I'd already filed a boundary confirmation request with the county, and I had time-stamped photos to prove it. Still, the officer asked me to turn off the mower and stay calm. Karen smiled. She thought she'd won again. She always did, because for months she'd been the face of the HOA's harassment campaign. Phony violation, letters about unapproved grass height, random fines for unauthorized tools, even a notice claiming my mailbox color disrupted aesthetic harmony. Each letter came signed by her or by the HOA president, Rick Leonard. Every complaint was designed to make me submit, to make me sell. I played along for a while. I paid the first few fines hoping it would stop, but it didn't. It got worse. Then 3 weeks before this 911 stunt, I found the real reason. The HOA had been negotiating with a local developer to expand the community park, and they needed my lot to connect the irrigation path, my land, my well access. And Karen, who chaired the beautification committee, was right in the middle of it. The officer eventually left, muttering something about civil matters. Karen gave me a smug wave. "You'll hear from the board," she said. She was right about that part. That evening, I found another letter on my porch. Violation 47A, unauthorized lawn maintenance on common area, $1,200 fine. Pay within 10 days or face lien. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the notice under the yellow light, the ink bleeding slightly where my hand had sweated. 10 years ago, this would have broken me. I'd have just written the check and swallowed the humiliation. But not anymore. Not since I'd retired from my 25 years as a real estate paralegal in Denver. See, I knew exactly how far they could push before crossing into criminal territory. I knew about fiduciary duties, about breach of trust, about civil injunctions. And I knew the magic words that turned HOA bullies into defendants. Pattern of racketeering activity. So I poured myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and began drafting a log. Every letter, every threat, every dollar. I noted dates, photos, officer badge numbers. I downloaded the dispatch record from that 911 call. I backed up the footage for my security cameras, the ones I'd installed after catching Rick's truck parked near my fence at midnight. The plan was simple: build the record before I struck. That night, thunder rolled over the foothills and the rain hit my roof like gravel. I watched through the window as water pulled near the property line. Their community fence leaned a little more, sagging toward my yard. Nature was already redrawing the truth they tried to bury. The next morning, Karen was out again, clipboard in hand, snapping photos of my wet driveway. "You'll be cited for runoff," she yelled across the lawn. I smiled. "That's county water, Karen, not HOA." She frowned, confused. She didn't know that I'd already checked the hydrology map. My parcel sat on a private well. Line recorded in 1986. The HOA had no jurisdiction there, but I didn't tell her that yet. Not yet, because as far as she knew, I was just another stubborn homeowner mowing the wrong side of the grass. By sundown, I had a USB drive filled with evidence, labeled HOA HARASM and TDY1. And the next morning, I'd visit the county record's office quietly, methodically, because sometimes justice doesn't start with a fight. It starts with a file number. The story of how I ended up owning her house, too, began right there with that mower and that 911 call. 3 days after the 911 call, a CK white envelope slid under my door. The return address said Highland Ridge HOA Enforcement Division. Inside was another violation, this one for unapproved use of mechanical equipment within sight lines of common property. Fine, $900. They were getting creative now. I laid the letter on my table beside the others, each envelope identical, each signature a near-perfect match of Rick Leonard's except one small detail. The initials at the bottom, sometimes read KL instead of RL. Corinne's hand. I poured myself black coffee and stared at the stack. 9 letters, 9 attempts to intimidate, but this one was different. It had a new footer. All unpaid fines will result in immediate lien placement. That phrase, immediate lien placement, wasn't even legal under Colorado HOA statutes. The HOA Act required notice, opportunity for hearing, and board approval. No shortcut, no immediate anything. Whoever wrote this didn't expect a homeowner who used to process property titles for a living. I opened my laptop, typed in the county's public access portal, and pulled up lien filings by Highland Ridge HOA. 7 new liens appeared, filed within 60 days, every single one targeted homeowners who'd spoken up at recent meetings. My neighbor Thomas, a retired mechanic, Linda, the widow 2 doors down, and me. They were running a coordinated campaign of financial pressure. I printed the records, dates, stamped them, then opened a spreadsheet, each entry, date, filer, property ID, reason, lien amount. Within 20 minutes, the pattern emerged like mold under light. Same notary seal, same timestamp pattern, same signature block. Someone was batching fake filings through the county clerk's e-record system. But here's what most people don't know. When you file a lien, you need underlying debt validation. Without a legitimate debt or court order, it's just paper. I needed to prove they were forging authority. So I went to the HOA meeting that Thursday. Corinne sat at the front, lipstick red, hair pulled tight. She smiled when she saw me walk in. Oh, look who decided to join the community at last, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Just wanted to understand where all these fines are coming from, I replied. Rick cleared his throat. They're from your non-compliance, your grass, your mailbox, your mower. Take your pick. Do you keep minutes of these meetings? I asked. Of course, Corinne said, still smirking. Good, I said, holding up small silver device. Because I'm recording this one too, under Colorado's one-party consent law. Just making sure everything's accurate. The room went silent. A couple of neighbors glanced at each other. Rick's jaw clenched. You can't. I can. Interrupted. And I will unless you prefer to explain why your lien notices don't have board approval signatures. Corinne leaned forward. You think you're some kind of lawyer? I smiled. No, but I was one's right hand for 25 years. Rick called a recess. Corinne stormed off toward the hallway, phone glued to her ear, probably calling their so-called HOA counsel, a man named Stephen Brandt, whose name kept popping up on the invoices I'd seen online. When the meeting resumed, they refused to answer questions about finances. Private matter, Rick said. That phrase again, the one bullies love. The next morning, Thomas came by with a wrinkled paper in his hand. You won't believe this, he said. They fin me for having my American flag at the wrong angle. I looked at the paper, same type face, same footer, same fraudulent legal tone. That's when I decided this wasn't harassment anymore. It was organized abuse. That evening, I scanned every document into a digital folder labeled Pattern A1, repeated coercive notices. Then I emailed myself the timestamp backup. If things escalated, and I knew they would, I wanted a chain of custody no court could challenge. But one thing still nagged me. How are they funding this? The HOA's dues were modest, yet they'd hired legal counsel, increased security patrols, and launched landscaping projects that no one had voted on. I dug deeper. County records showed a sudden cash influx, a $350,000 community improvement grant. I traced the routing entry back to a limited liability company, Linwood Property Holdings, LLC. And guess who was listed as agent? Rick Leonard. That was the crack in the armor I needed, because if the HOA was funneling money through a private company, that was self-dealing, a direct breach of fiduciary duty. In plain English, corruption. I printed the records, attached them to my growing binder, and wrote on the cover, Phase 2, Financial Exploitation. Outside, dusk turned the neighborhood orange. I watched Corinne walk her dog past my driveway, stopping just long enough to glare at my security camera. "You can't record me," she shouted. "Public sidewalk, Corinne," I said. "Section 163311. Colorado." She muttered something and walked off. I smiled, but not because I'd won. I smiled because I finally saw the full board, and every piece was falling into place. That night, as I uploaded files to my encrypted drive, I realized what the next step had to be. I needed to expose their falsified surveys, the real foundation of every violation. And tomorrow, I'd bring in an independent land surveyor. And by the time we were done, the HOA's fake property lines would unravel like the lies they were built on. The next morning, the Colorado sky was a pale blue wash over the plains, thin clouds drifting above as if nothing in the world could be wrong, but I knew better. I had an appointment with a man named Elliot Crane, a licensed land surveyor who'd spent 30 years measuring truth in inches and feet, a truth that HOA boards usually feared. He arrived in a white pickup, a laser level mounted in the back, and a rolled-up tripod tucked under his arm. "You're the guy with the mower story, right?" he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Words fast," I replied. "Small county," he said with a smile. "But I've seen worse. Let's see what your neighbors have been stealing." We started from the northern fence, the one the HOA had claimed as their community green buffer. Elliot unrolled his equipment, adjusted the scope, and marked the survey pins on my deed map. After 30 minutes, he frowned. "Your original pin's missing." "What do you mean missing?" "I mean gone, replaced by this." He held up a small orange plastic stake, bright, new, and nowhere near the right spot. We followed the line 20 yards east, another stake, also fake. He measured the distance, muttering numbers. "They've shifted the boundary markers inward 10 ft almost exactly. Classic land creep tactic." I felt a chill in my spine. That meant nearly 300 square feet of my property had been stolen and absorbed into community land. Multiply that by 10 houses, and you had a major land grab hidden under bureaucratic jargon. Elliot took photographs, GPS coordinates, and digital timestamps for every corner. "If you need to file a complaint, this will hold up in court." He said. "I'll do more than that," I said. By noon, I had the certified survey in my email, showing red lines for the original property boundaries and yellow for the new fraudulent ones. The difference looked like a crime scene, precision theft masked as landscaping. I sent copies to myself, my lawyer friend in Denver, and an off-site backup. Then, just to make sure the HOA couldn't destroy evidence, I printed everything and sealed it in an envelope labeled property documentation. Do not destroy. That evening, I attended another HOA meeting. Corinne was there, of course, sitting front and center with that self-satisfied smile. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and placed the survey results on the table. "This," I said, "is the real map of Highland Ridge. Your fence is 10 ft into my parcel." Corinne laughed. "You probably hired some cheap guy with a fake license. I slid the second page across. Certified by the State of Colorado Surveyor Board, signed and sealed. You. Want to check the credentials? The room murmured. Rick shifted in his seat. I continued, and here's the fun part. You've billed homeowners for maintaining that extra land under community irrigation. That's illegal under state HOA financial statutes. It's called unjust enrichment. Rick slammed his folder shut. You're making baseless accusations. Then let's see the HOA's original plat. Approval, I said calmly. Show us the county recording that justifies this. Boundary shift, no one spoke. That's when I realized they didn't have one. Corinne's voice cracked. We're allowed to make small adjustments for beautification. Not without county consent, I said, and certainly not with fraudulent survey markers. You didn't beautify anything. Corinne, you stole land. The tension broke when Thomas, my neighbor, stood up. He's right. They moved my marker too. I lost a whole strip behind my shed. Then Linda raised her hand. Mine's been gone for months. One by one, people started murmuring. The illusion of order shattered. Rick tried to give the meeting closed, but the crowd wouldn't stop. Corinne shouted over them. This man is manipulating. He's trying to destroy our community. I looked her straight in the eye. No, Corinne. I'm trying to save it from people like you. When I got home, I checked my mailbox. Another violation letter, this time for unauthorized third-party contractor presence. They fined me for hiring the surveyor. I laughed out loud. They couldn't help themselves, but I also noticed something new. The footer was missing the HOA logo, and the sender's address had changed. Instead of Highland Ridge HOA, it now said Community Integrity Office LLC. That's when it clicked. They were moving their activities off the HOA books. Shell company, probably tied to that Linwood Property Holdings entity I uncovered. I ran a business search through the state's corporate registry. Sure enough, Community Integrity Office was registered 2 months earlier. The agent, Corinne Elbenson, it was all there. The harassment, the fake fines, the land theft, all funneled through a private company so they could dodge accountability. That night, I added a new tab to my evidence log. RICO indicators, shell entity pattern. Under it, I listed 1. Same actors across multiple fraudulent acts. 2. Financial gain via false liens. 3. Coordinated effort to conceal ownership through LLCs. 4. Victim intimidation through false notices. The definition of a racketeering pattern was clear. 2 or more predicate acts. Connected by intent and scheme, they'd done far more than that. As rain began to fall outside, the neighborhood lights shimmered across puddles. My security cameras blinked red at the edges of my yard, silent witnesses to months of abuse. Corinne and Rick thought this was about grass height and fences, but they had no idea that by moving those stakes, they'd crossed a federal line, because in the eyes of the law, what they'd done wasn't a community adjustment, it was property fraud, and I had the survey to prove it. The HOA meetings had gone silent for 2 weeks. No emails, no letters, no fines. No Corinne, but quiet isn't always peace. In my experience, quiet means they're hiding something, and they were, while the neighbors were still reeling from the fake boundary lines. I'd moved on to the one thing that never lies, the money. Every homeowners association is required to publish a financial report annually. But Highland Ridge hadn't issued one in nearly 18 months when I asked for it. Formally citing Colorado's Common Interest Ownership Act, they ignored me. That was a mistake because when a request goes unanswered for more than 10 business days, it becomes a statutory violation. I documented that, so I filed a formal demand letter. Then I made 3 calls. 1 to the county auditor's office, 1 to a contact I knew in the Division of Real Estate, and 1 to Stephen Crowley, a forensic accountant I'd worked with years ago on a commercial property embezzlement case. Stephen was the kind of guy who could find a stolen nickel buried under 10 years of cooked books. He agreed to help Pruno because screwing over homeowners is a special kind of evil. He said, "We started by reviewing the HOA's public filings, expense line items, and whatever scraps we could get from meeting minutes. It was threadbare, but there were patterns. Pattern 1. Payments labeled Community Improvement all led to Linwood Property Holdings LLC. Pattern 2. Landscaping invoices repeated the same amounts every month down to the cent. No variance, no weather delays, no material receipts. Pattern 3. Legal fees billed to Community Integrity Office LLC, Corinne's private company. Stephen's verdict was simple. It's laundering. HOA dues are going out the front door and coming back through shell companies. Classic. That night I drove to the county clerk's office and requested all HOA liens filed in the last 24 months. The clerk, an older man named Rye, gave me a stack of printouts. They've been busy, he said with a chuckle. I wasn't laughing because half of those liens had been filed against homes that no longer had outstanding dues. Some were filed after the homes were sold, meaning no legal standing. They were padding the ledger, creating a paper trail of enforcement to justify rising legal fees which went to Corinne. I cross-checked that against my neighborhood Zillow records. Several homes had sold at below market rates after disputes with HOA. The pattern was there too. New owners all tied to one name, Canyon Trust Really registered under Rick's cousin. I sat back in my chair, the files spread across my dining table, the evidence damning and clear. They weren't just overstepping. They were flipping houses through forced violation harassment, driving down prices, buying cheap then reselling at market value. I'd seen RICO patterns before in commercial schemes, but this was suburban warfare. The next morning I drafted a formal complaint to the state attorney general's office. Subject: pattern of racketeering activity, Highland Ridge HOA. I attached 43 pages of evidence, survey maps, shell companies, financial transfers, fake fines. ICD the county assessor, ICCD local media, and I didn't sign it anonymously. 2 days later I got a call. Mr. Travers, this is Deputy Laura Delgado with the AG's office. We received your complaint. Her voice was calm, direct. We're assigning an investigator. In the meantime, do not confront them further. We need your cooperation to gather more. I agreed, but that didn't mean I had to stay silent, so I did something else. I posted a message on Nextdoor titled Greater Than. Have you been fined by Highland Ridge HOA? Less than, greater. Then greater than, if so, please message me. You may be entitled to reimbursement for fraudulent liens, fake inspections, or manipulated violations. I'm compiling records for an official complaint, anonymity protected. Within hours, I had 17 messages. A woman named Melissa said her son was sent $600 noise fine while away at college. A retired veteran named George said they threatened to sue him for planting tomatoes. And an elderly couple, the Marshalls, said they'd lost their savings trying to fight Corinne in arbitration over a fence that had stood since 1982. Each story echoed mine, each voice cracked with quiet pain. And I knew right then this wasn't just about me anymore. That weekend, I hosted a coffee hour in my garage. I laid out printouts, documents, flowcharts. The neighbors came, 21 of them. We didn't talk about lawns or fences. We talked about fraud. We voted unanimously to demand a full forensic audit of the HOA, and I was appointed to lead it. Corinne didn't show her face that week. Rick posted a notice canceling the next board meeting due to safety concerns. But safety wasn't the issue. Truth was. And for the first time, it was louder than their lies. As I backed up every folder on my external drive that night, I added a new HOA reform phase 3 audit push, because we weren't just building a case anymore, we were building a movement, and the next strike would come from inside their own accounting. 3 weeks passed. The neighborhood looked quiet on the surface, but the tension was simmering. People mowed in silence, walked their dogs without looking up. Kids stopped chalking the sidewalks. The HOA had gone dark. No meetings, no updates, just passive-aggressive flyers stuck to mailboxes about community Unity, but I wasn't resting because the storm hadn't passed. It had just gone. Inside the house, late one Tuesday night around 2:43 a.m., I got a ping on my phone, motion alert from Cam 3 side yard. I sat up in bed, thumbing the screen. And there it was, two figures, flashlights off, moving along the back of my fence line. One of them was holding something, maybe spray paint, maybe a measuring tape. I zoomed in. The quality wasn't perfect, but the gait was unmistakable. The shorter one with the clipped stride, that was Corinne. The taller one, bulkier, in a black hoodie. Rick. They were back, and this time they weren't mailing letters, they were marking ground again. I hit record, downloaded the clip, and backed it up to 3 drives. At 3:07 a.m. I got a second ping. Cam 2 garage side, same pair now moving along my garage wall, placing a yellow flag near the drainage. That meant one thing: they were preparing a claim, probably a new violation, drainage encroachment or runoff interference, anything they could invent to justify another lien, or worse, justify removing a section of my property by force. But this time I had them in night vision HD. By dawn I had a full suite of clips, each with embedded timestamps, geolocation data, and matching frames from my exterior floodlight log. I called Deputy Laura Delgado, the AG investigator. "I think you'll want to see this," I said. She came by that afternoon in an unmarked black SUV. No uniform, just jeans and a field jacket, serious eyes. I showed her the footage. She didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. Then she looked at me and said, "This changes everything. Under Colorado revised statutes, unauthorized trespass with intent to damage or manipulate property, especially when done by HOA officials with financial interest, crossed into criminal territory. Do not engage them directly," she said. "We're pulling a subpoena for their internal communications. This will trigger oversight." But that's when I remembered something even bigger. 2 years ago, Corinne had pushed through an amendment quietly allowing the HOA to use contracted third-party inspections to assess property compliance during off hours for accuracy. It passed with barely any oversight. Most of us thought it was just a technicality. But it gave them legal cover to step onto our land if they claimed it was an inspection. Unless I opened the footage again and paused it on frame 312. Corinne was holding a can, not a clipboard, not a camera, not even a phone, just a can of yellow spray paint. That wasn't inspection. That was marking. And under Colorado trespass law, anything that alters the condition of private land, even paint without permission, voids the inspection clause, meaning Corinne and Rick had no protection, and I had them cold. Delgado nodded. "This isn't just abuse. This is coordinated fraud with intent to tamper with physical evidence. That's a prosecutable offense." The next day I filed an emergency civil restraining order against both of them, citing safety concerns and documented trespass with malicious intent. I included the video stills, timestamp logs, and a notarized statement. The judge approved it in under 48 hours. They couldn't come within 100 FT of my property. And once that restraining order was posted online, others followed. Thomas filed his, Linda did too. Even the marshals in their 80s drove to the courthouse and asked for assistance. The pattern of intimidation was now public record. But I wasn't done. I created a shareable Google Drive for all impacted residents. I uploaded a zip file, HOA trespass evidence, full set, every video, every still, annotated, time-labeled. Neighbors began sending their own clips. One caught Corinne at 5:30 a.m. poking a tape measure through a backyard gate. Another showed Rick talking to a contractor behind the clubhouse at night, pointing at a parcel map. We were connecting the dots. Then I received a call from Channel 8 Investigates. A local reporter had gotten wind of the story through the AG's office. "Would you be willing to speak on camera?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep it quiet, let the law work, but then I remembered the Marshalls, their fear, their fixed income, their loss. "Yes," I said, "I'll talk, but it's not about me, it's about all of us." The next week, the segment aired, HOA harassment or criminal enterprise. Highland Ridge residents fight back, drone shots of our neighborhood, voice. Over about fake fines. Then the night vision footage, Karen, Rick, yellow. Paint my voice off screen. It's not just about fences, it's about control, it's about bullying. And for once, we said enough. By Friday, the HOA board issued a statement. All enforcement actions are hereby suspended pending internal review. Rick disappeared. Corinne's house had a for sale sign by Sunday, but for us, the battle wasn't over. We weren't after silence, we were after reform. And now we had the one thing we'd never had before, proof on camera. A week after the night vision footage aired on Channel 8, I filed a formal Colorado Open Records Act CORA request, the state's equivalent of FOIA, targeting a very specific window, all communications between Highland Ridge, HOA and the county zoning office, the assessor's department, and any licensed surveyor or third-party enforcement contractor employed in the last 18 months. Why? Because Karen and Rick had kept insisting that their actions were approved by official county inspectors, that their maps, fines, and boundary adjustments were verified. If that was true, there'd be an email, a report, a signed approval. So I filed the request, named the departments in, submitted it through the county portal, and then I waited. 5 business days later, I got the first batch, 8 PDFs, 263 pages, all public record. And in the very first document, a forwarded email chain from 6 months prior, I read this. This proposed adjustment to the eastern green buffer will require new survey certification. Until then, no boundary enforcement shall be initiated. Alan Greer, County Zoning Officer. Yet, the HOA had enforced that boundary for months, issued fines, filed liens, even built a new fence section. They acted without the county's go-ahead. They lied. But the deeper I dug, the darker it got. In Document 6, a contractor named Martin Castillo, who'd done inspection reports for the HOA, wrote in a blunt email, "I haven't received payment for the last batch of templates. Also, you never sent the actual inspection locations. If you want me to keep formatting blank forms, we need a better system." Blank forms, they weren't doing inspection. They were mass producing fake violation templates to be filled in later. No on-site visits, no confirmation, just templated fines, and Corinne had been sending them. Her email cockbenson at CIO Consulting Mail.com appeared in 14 threads. She referred to violations as routine yield bumps. That's what they called it, yield bumps. Like we were crops, like our property was just another harvest to be extracted. I compiled the findings into a new report, FOIA Findings V1 PDF. Pages 1 to 5, Boundary Interference Without County Approval. Pages 6 to 14, Evidence of False Inspection Reports. Pages 15 to 20, Contractor Correspondence Implying Fraud. Pages 21 to 25, Direct Quotes from Corinne, Using HOA Funds to Offset Operational Gaps. I forwarded the report to Deputy Delgado. Within an hour, she called back. "This is enough to initiate subpoenas for internal HOA email server," she said. "We'll need witness statements to support it. I already had them. Thomas, Linda, George, the veteran, Melissa, all agreed to submit statements. All had timelines, photos, copies of fines. The AG's office opened an official civil investigation case under the Colorado Organized Fraudulent Activity Statute. Meanwhile, I didn't stay idle. I printed the FOIA report and hand-delivered a copy to each household. Inside the front page, I wrote, "These are the lies we were told. These are the receipts." Some cried, some cursed. One neighbor, an older man named Jerome, looked me in the eyes and said, "We thought we were crazy." "No," I told him. "They just wanted us to feel that way." By the end of that week, 42 homes had signed a petition demanding a full HOA audit by an independent third party. Under the Highland Ridge bylaws, 30% of homeowners could force a special vote. We had 58%. And then came the twist I never expected. A young woman named Claire knocked on my door one morning. She introduced herself as an intern at the county assessor's office. See, she held out a file. I thought you should see this. I probably shouldn't even be bringing it to you, but inside were copies of internal memos. They showed that the HOA had applied for a zoning variance to reclassify my lot as shared access. Buffer 3 months before they ever notified me, which meant they weren't reacting to violations. They were pre-justifying their plan to seize my land. It was premeditated. I added the memos to the FOIA packet and sent an updated version to every homeowner labeled HOA Intentional Restructure Proof Addendum, PDF. Within 48 hours, 3 local reporters contacted me. 2 lawyers offered to help residents recover damages, and 1 city council member asked if I'd be willing to testify at the next zoning oversight meeting. The moment had arrived. Corinne and Rick had spun a web of fake reports, ghost inspectors, and backdoor zoning tricks. But now the light was on, and when the truth hits paper, not even the most powerful HOA can white it out. I'll never forget the way the court clerk looked at me when I slid the folder across the counter. "You're filing this per se?" she asked, eyeing the thick, tabbed binder with my name on it. "I am," I said, but I had a 25-year head start. Inside the folder was a civil complaint spanning 87 pages. Count 1, breach of fiduciary duty. Count 2, trespass with malice. Count 3, civil conspiracy to defraud. Count 4, pattern of racketeering activity under state analog to RICO. Count 5, declaratory and injunctive relief. Each count had citation, exhibits, and witness declarations from at least 6 neighbors. I attached drone photos, the certified survey, FOIA disclosures, forensic accounting analysis, and night vision footage. I named the HOA as defendant, of course, but also Corinne, Rick, Community Integrity Office LLC, and Linwood Property Holdings individually and jointly. The moment the complaint was officially time-stamped, 10:38 a.m. Wednesday, I walked out of the courthouse with a copy, scanned it, and uploaded it to the HOA Watchdog Dropbox I'd created for our residents. Subject line: "It's filed." That same afternoon, Corinne broke silence. She posted a 3-paragraph screed on the HOA bulletin board calling me a destabilizing force who had weaponized misinformation. It backfired. Within minutes, homeowners began responding publicly, recounting their own stories of threats, forged fines, and fear. And then something incredible happened. An email from attorney Michael Choi hit my inbox. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. He was a top-tier litigator in Denver who'd once mentored me during my paralegal days. He'd seen the Channel 8 story, read the FOIA dump, watched the drone footage. "Mark," he wrote, "you've got more than a civil suit. You've got leverage. Let me help you take it federal." We spoke that night for over an hour. He explained how we could refer the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office under 18 U.S.C. Section 1962, subsection C, the federal RICO statute. If we could prove a pattern of predicate acts, mail fraud, wire fraud, obstruction, enterprise involvement, financial gain via repeated coordinated abuse. We already had most of it, but to bridge the gap, we needed banking records, transfers showing HOA dues going to private accounts, and that's when fate handed us one last key. Linda, one of our oldest neighbors, had once been a co-signer on the HOA's reserve account back when the board was honest. She still had access logs to the old checkbook registry and PayPal statements. She came to my garage that Sunday carrying a dusty accordion folder. Inside were receipts showing multiple checks written from the HOA account to Community Integrity Office, all labeled event coordination, but there had never been any events, no flyers, no vendors, nothing. One check for $7,500 had Corinne's signature, and the memo line read simply "Land Buffer PR." We scanned every page, attached them as Exhibit M with Michael Choi now co-counsel. We filed an amended complaint and submitted a federal referral request. By then, the pressure on the board reached a breaking point. Corinne vanished, her home once the most aggressively manicured in the subdivision, now sat with dead grass and a faded for sale sign. Rick resigned via email. No apology, no explanation, and the rest of the board. They called an emergency all-members meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, packed with folding chairs and neighbors who'd finally had enough. I stood up when called, breath deep. Looked around and I said, what happened here wasn't just bad leadership, it was calculated fraud. We trusted them. They sold our land fine. Our elders lied to our faces. But the law has a long memory and the paper trail is loud. The room was silent, not out of fear, but awakening. Then Thomas the mechanic stood. So what do we do now? I answered simply. We vote them out. Within 20 minutes, every board seat was vacated. We held a recall. Election right there per bylaws, elect. In an interim board made up of volunteers, 2 veterans, a retired teacher, a young mother, and myself. First motion passed unanimously. Request full forensic audit by county. Second, voluntary suspension of all HOA. Fines and liens pending investigation. Third, motion to cooperate fully with Attorney General's office and federal investigators. By the end of the meeting, the HOA wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a tool for us. That night, I stood in my backyard looking at the same line Corinne once tried to erase with yellow paint. It was still there, but this time the line wasn't in spray. It was in ink, filed, stamped, and irreversible. When you spend enough time digging through property records, you start to see things others miss. Parcel numbers that don't match, mortgage notes buried in footnotes, owners listed as trustees instead of names. That's how I found it. It started with a routine review of lien filings. I was cross-referencing properties that had been liened twice or more by Highland Ridge HOA when I noticed something off about Corinne's home, Lot 17. See, her house had been listed under a holding entity, Maple Ridge Ventures, LLC. No surprise, many HOA leaders put their homes in trusts or companies to hide assets, but the deeper I looked, the stranger it got. Because Maple Ridge Ventures didn't just hold Corinne's house, it had 6 other properties in the subdivision, all acquired through pre-foreclosure transfers after HOA liens were enforced. And guess who had registered that LLC 2 years ago? Rick Leonard. But here's the twist. Maple Ventures took out a hard money loan to purchase Corinne's property after her husband passed. The collateral, a portfolio of undervalued lots in a promissory note. I recognized the loan structure immediately. Because I was one of the investors, after retiring as a paralegal, I'd quietly put some money into a pooled real estate fund that bought distressed liens. Back then, I never paid attention to the specifics. It was just numbers, a dividend every quarter. Until now, I contacted the fund manager, asked for the trust deeds tied to our holding company. He emailed me a packet. Inside, plain as day, was this: greater than property 91 Sycamore Loop, Lot 17C. Greater than deed holder Highland Recovery Investments, greater than lender Mark Travers, 5% equity position, my name on the paperwork as a partial lien holder on Corinne's home. She didn't own it outright, never had. Her payments were being made to a suror tied to our investment group. And after 3 months of default, her title would revert to foreclosure proceedings, and the clock was already ticking. She'd missed 2 payments. Legally, I could force the issue. I sat in my study that night, the rain smattering softly on the window panes, the absurdity of it settling in. She had called 911 on me for mowing my grass, had tried to steal 10 FT of my land, had fined me into the ground, and now I held the paper that would decide whether she stayed or left her home. But I didn't rush. Instead, I called Michael Choi. "Marley, I need your opinion." I said, "I can foreclose." She broke the rules, lied, hurt good people, but I didn't get into this to play their game. He was quiet for a moment. "Mark," he said, "the difference between justice and revenge is documentation and procedure. If the foreclosure is lawful, let it happen. But don't gloat, let the record speak. So I did. I sent Corinne a letter. No threats, no aggression. Dear Miss Benson, it has come to my attention through public records that your property at 91 Sycamore Loop is presently under loan terms connected to a lien pool in which I am a minority stakeholder. As you are currently in default, please be advised that a foreclosure may be initiated if no corrective action is taken within 30 days. This is not personal, this is the law. Mark Travers. 3 days later, a U-Haul appeared in her driveway. She never responded, never apologized, she just disappeared, and in her place came something unexpected: silence, a kind of peace that had been foreign to our neighborhood for years. But it wasn't just about Corinne anymore. We had real work ahead. With the interim board in place, we began cleaning up all liens imposed in the past 2 years were reviewed and 64 rescinded. A full financial audit was conducted by the county auditor's office. We rewrote the bylaws line by line, eliminating loopholes that allowed fines without hearings. And perhaps most importantly, we passed a transparency amendment greater than no HOA officer may conduct business with or direct payments to any entity in which they or a relative hold more than a 5% interest. We called it the Corinne Clause. One afternoon, as I pulled weeds from my garden, Thomas walked by. He paused, looked at the line where our properties met. No more fights over fence posts, huh? He said. Not unless you start planting on my side, I replied. He grinned. You ever think you'd end up owning the villain's house? I shook my head. I never wanted it. Boo. The system worked finally because we made it work. That night I walked through Corinne's old house for the first time. It had been listed, foreclosed, and quietly transferred to the fund. We planned to sell it and donate a portion of the profit to a legal defense fund for homeowners targeted by abusive HOAs. There was a strange stillness in the place, a forgotten candle in the kitchen, a dusty mirror in the hallway. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, because justice doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like an empty house and a full ledger. Sometimes it just looks like quiet. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, just 2 rows of wooden benches, a dry whisper of air conditioning, and a state seal carved into the back wall above the judge's chair. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, but it was real. And after 9 months of gathering evidence, organizing residents, surviving threats, lies, and trespassing, we had finally made it to this room, and that meant everything. The hearing had been scheduled as a preliminary injunction request. Our goal wasn't to win the whole war just yet, but to freeze HOA actions, suspend their authority, and block enforcement of any fines, liens, or foreclosures until our full civil RICO case could be tried. I sat at the table beside Michael Choi, binder open, exhibits labeled alphabetically. My voice recorder was on, not for court use, just for me, for history. Across from us sat a different Corinne, pale, quiet, withdrawn. She was now represented by counsel, a man in a loose brown suit with a stack of papers he hadn't even opened yet. Rick Leonard wasn't present. He had been served a subpoena but failed to appear. A bench warrant was pending. The judge, a gay-haired woman named Judge Kavanaugh, read through our filing with sharp, deliberate eyes. No theatrics, just reading. Mr. Travers, she finally said, you are the lead plaintiff. I am, Your Honor, and you are a licensed attorney. No, ma'am. Retired real estate paralegal representing myself and the homeowner. Petitioners per se. She nodded. Very well. Your motion asks for emergency injunctive relief based on allegations of fraudulent enforcement activity, shell company laundering, coordinated harassment, and property trespass under a theory of racketeering. You've attached 27 exhibits. Is that correct? Correct. She looked up. Start with the fence. I laid out Exhibit A, the certified survey. Then Exhibit B, the night vision footage. Exhibit C, the trespass timestamps. One by one, like peeling wallpaper, we stripped away the HOA's version of reality. Then came Exhibit G, the FOIA documents. Exhibit M, the fund transfer logs. Exhibit P, the fake inspection. Templates, I heard whispers behind me. Several reporters were in the room scribbling. Notes, a woman in the front row teared up when Linda, our elderly neighbor, stood to testify about how Corinne had tried to fine her for planting wild flowers, then tried to seize her land as common beautification space. Michael Choi handled the legal ease. I spoke plain truth. We were preyed upon, I said, by people who learned the system just well enough to weaponize it. The defense lawyer finally spoke. Stumbling through boilerplate, these are isolated events, he said. Any errors were clerical, and the board was acting within discretionary power afforded by the governing documents. Judge Kavanaugh raised one eyebrow. You mean the governing documents they rewrote to favor themselves according to your client's own email and Exhibit R? He froze. I am not familiar with that. Exhibit, she looked at me, Mr. Travers. I opened the page, read aloud. Great. Then, we should revise Section 8 to allow emergency board action on fines above $2,000 without hearings. Just push it through during the summer lull when no one notices. Corinne Benson, July 2023. The courtroom went still. That's not governance, Judge Kavanaugh said. That's ambush. Then she turned to the clerk. I am granting the preliminary injunction in full, she said, effective immediately. Highland Ridge HOA shall cease all enforcement actions pending the outcome of civil and criminal investigations now underway. She paused. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the State Bar for review of ethical violations related to attorney conduct, and to the State Auditor's Office for financial forensic review. Corinne sank deeper in her chair. I didn't smile, just nodded. It was never about revenge. It was about recording the truth, letting the system do what it was meant to do. After the ruling, residents hugged in the hallway. A few cried. Linda whispered, "You saved our homes." No, I said, we saved each other. That afternoon, Channel 8 aired a follow-up story. Court sides with residents in explosive HOA fraud case. Board power frozen. State launches criminal probe. Drone shots of our neighborhood, this time brighter. Voices of families speaking without fear. A community that had once hidden behind curtains now standing with H signs that read, "We own our homes, not them." Rick was eventually arrested in another county on unrelated fraud charges. Investigators uncovered offshore accounts tied to the kickback scheme with Linwood Property Holdings. Corinne settled out of court. Part of her agreement included forfeiting all positions in any HOA organization for life and repaying over $70,000 in misused funds. We used that money to install solar lighting, public benches, and fund a free legal clinic for HOA-related abuse. Victims statewide, justice didn't come quickly, it came deliberately, through evidence, through process, through each voice that refused to be silenced, and in the center of it all was a simple truth: no one can own your land if you stand on it with both feet planted and receipts in hand. The final chapter didn't come with a gavel slam or a news headline. It came with a motion passed under a small tent during a spring HOA meeting held on folding chairs beneath a blooming cottonwood. A motion written by neighbors, not lawyers, and signed with ballpoint pens rather than rubber stamps. It came from us. We called it the Highland Ridge Fair Governance Amendment. Its principles were simple: no fines without a majority board vote and written photographic evidence. All financial transactions must be published online quarterly with independent oversight. No individual may serve on the HOA board if they have financial ties to any vendor or contractor receiving HOA funds. Every homeowner has a right to access all meeting minutes, audits, and violation records within 10 business days of written request. Any attempt to falsify records results in immediate suspension and referral to the state attorney general. It passed with 91% approval. For the first time, our neighborhood truly belonged to its people. And yet that wasn't the end. we realized that what happened here, what almost destroyed our community, wasn't rare. HOA abuse was spreading like a virus in towns across Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, Arizona. Anywhere where a few people with power and no oversight could weaponize rules against the very people they claimed to protect. So I did what I always do. I wrote it down. I documented every step, every letter, recording, timestamp, camera angle, statute cited, clause invoked, and dollar followed. I turned it into a public guide titled, How to Fight HOA Abuse from Harassment to Justice. We released it under a Creative Commons license, free for download, and shared it with every local HOA reform group we could find. It spread faster than I imagined. Local newspapers picked it up. A county commissioner called and asked for a briefing, and then a state senator reached out. Senator Trujillo from Fort Collins wanted to draft legislation requiring forensic audits every 5 years for HOAs, over 100 homes, and mandatory training for board members on ethics and financial compliance. She asked me to testify, and I did. I stood in the Colorado State House, not as a lawyer, not as an expert, just a man who got tired of watching neighbors cry over mailboxes and fences and $800 grass fines. I told them how Corinne called the cops over a mower, how Rick created shell companies, how they tried to steal 10 FT of every yard in our subdivision and almost got away with it. But I also told them how we fought back with documents, with community, with law. The bill passed committee, then passed the floor. In June of that year, it became law, the Homeowner Protection and Transparency Act. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Back home, things were quieter, the fines were gone, the gates were open, kids played in the cul-de-sac again. Marshall's hosted barbecues every Sunday. Thomas built a tool shed legally this time, and Corinne's old house, we sold it, used the proceeds to create a local nonprofit, Neighbors First, offering free legal support for victims of HOA harassment. We staffed it with retired attorneys, paralegals, and volunteers. And every time someone walked through those doors scared of losing their home, they were met with coffee, clarity, and calm. No more fear. As for me, I still mow my lawn every Saturday, still use the same John Deere mower. Sometimes I pause at the edge right by that fence line. Corinne once tried to move 10 FT west, and I smile because that line, it doesn't belong to the HOA. It doesn't belong to Corinne. It doesn't even really belong to me. It belongs to every person who ever stood their ground with a truth no one wanted to hear and said, "This is my home, and you don't get to take it."